Namaste everyone here at BookTube. Welcome to my channel, Hamsavahini Vajrastra. I'm Ahuna. Today's video is going to be my quick wrap up for the NightingaleAugust challenge as well as its extension NightingaleSeacoleSeptember challenge. Now the NightingaleAugust challenge had commenced from the 1st of August 2020 and had been extended till the 30th of September 2020. I have posted a link to the announcement videos in the description box below, so in case if you would like to know more about these two readathons which had been hosted in the month of August and extended to the month of September, do please check the links. Now the NightingaleAugust challenge was a set of 5 challenges and the NightingaleSeacoleSeptember was a set of 6 challenges. The criteria was that anybody who was interested could participate or was interested in participation could have done one challenge from the NightingaleAugust challenge and one challenge from the NightingaleSeacoleSeptember challenge. So one from both the challenges of the respective months was imperative. So I had chosen to complete all the 5 challenges listed under the NightingaleAugust challenge, and I had selected one challenge for the NightingaleSeacoleSeptember out of the 6 challenges which were present there. So I'll come first to the NightingaleAugust challenge. The first prompt of the NightingaleAugust challenge was to read a biography of Florence Nightingale. So for this, the first book that I'd chosen was God's Servant at the Battlefield, a biography of Florence Nightingale written by David R. Collins. Now this was all about the moral values which had built, on which Florence Nightingale had built her entire basis of faith and work, which propelled her to do so much and to achieve so much in the field of nursing, and she became one of the founders of the modern nursing as we know today. And this she did not in hope of fame, but because it was her call of duty to God's service. And there's a detailed explanation which I have tried to share in one of the videos. I have posted a link to that video in the description box below, so if you would like to know more about this, do please check that video. It will give you a detailed explanation of what I found with regards to the moral foundation, groundwork, as well as the scriptures which guided her during her very hard and tumultuous time when she was in the Crimean War healing the soldiers. So do please check that video. Now the next book which I had chosen for this particular prompt was Florence Nightingale, The Woman and Her Legend, a biography by Bostridge, and this was a mammoth book. And I read this almost all throughout August, and I had coupled this with 2 other separate readathon challenges. The first was the Tomb Topple Readathon Challenge, which was a 14-day readathon challenge for which I had chosen this book, and the second one was the History Challenge, which was also 14 days, I believe. And I have spoken in length about this particular book in those 2 challenges, so I have posted a link in the description box below for those 2 for this particular book, or whatever I've said for this book in those 2 challenges. So do please check that link. It will give you a very good and a detailed explanation, or detailed I would say synopsis of what I found in this book. So I actually loved this book, and honestly speaking, I never knew much about Florence Nightingale. I was quite curious about her because she seemed to be a very prominent figure when it came to hospitals, and whenever I used to go to a hospital, I always used to see Florence Nightingale somewhere or the other, wherever we used to find the nursing department working. And I knew that she was a very famous lady of the Victorian age, and she was very strict, and she had a very good moral character, so that drove me to know more about Florence Nightingale, and this challenge was created. Now the second challenge of this NightingaleAugust challenge was, or the second prompt of the NightingaleAugust challenge was to read a work, or a literary work which was non-fiction and non-medical, written by Florence Nightingale herself. So for this I had chosen to read Cassandra, and this was from the letters which she had written and which she had shared. It was adopted, or not adopted exactly, this was actually adapted from there. It's not even adapted, it was taken from there, and it had been put together in Cassandra because it was a prominent question thrown straight up to the Victorian ladies who were wasting their time, according to Florence Nightingale, living in the luxuries and the living in a very ideal, I would say, ideal and flamboyant lifestyle which they were adhering to, whereas their country needed them, the land needed them, and there's a lot that they could contribute to, even with the education that they had, and they could have trained, and they would also be uplifting the society by becoming good, moral, Christian, I would say, examples for the society and for the generation in future. So this was something which this book encompassed about, and I won't be talking much about this book over here, but I will be speaking about this book in one of the challenges which is currently ongoing, and I've chosen this book again, so I'll be rereading this, and please wait for that particular video which comes out, because I will be talking a lot about this particular book from there on. So now, the third prompt of this challenge was to read either about the Crimean War or to read about the contributions of Florence Nightingale during the Crimean War. So for this, I had chosen No Place for Ladies by Helen Rappaport, which is actually written brilliantly, and I absolutely love this book. Now, I was supposed to do an entire book review on this, but I really did not find the time. However, I would recommend this book for anybody who would like to know more about the Crimean War and how women, especially, were affected by the Crimean War, because mostly what we do is we only read about the events on the battlefield, but we don't see what impact it has on the society which is participating in the war. So this book deals with the women in particular and how they were affected by the events which took place in the Crimean War. So the first aspect that I would like to mention is this was the first time that women were forced to look for jobs for themselves, and children were all bundled up haphazardly in orphanages. So during this time we also have literary works of Charles Dickens, like Oliver Twist, etc., and it all talks about the Industrial Revolution, as well as it talks about how children were affected. But this book gives a very practical view, and you could actually relate the story of Oliver Twist and what was happening with the children over here. Now, this book opens with the soldiers who were recruited for the Crimean War, and they were passing off, not passing on, but they were marching off onto the docks for mounting the ship, or for which was taking them to the Crimean War, of course. Now, this had left a huge impact on the women, because an average foot soldier in the British regiment, who was enrolled in the British regiment, was supposed to seek permission to marry from his reporting officer, and in case if he never got the permission, then he was supposed to not marry at all. Most women who had been joining the regiment as a foot soldier, or who were in the cavalry or any other I would say regiments which were present in the British Army in those days, had to seek permission, and they were actually discouraged from having extra burdens, so that the government did not have to provide extra provisions, so they could save money on that part, plus they could keep the soldier focused on his part, so which is to fight in the war. So without any distractions, of course, of family, etc., or longings to go back, etc. So this was something which was very sad to know, but it was absolutely true, because the British government was doing its job, so you can't really say that the commanding officers were doing anything wrong. But the fact that these foot soldiers, when they were not in the war, they secretly married, and without the permission of the reporting officers, and therefore there were a lot of ghost marriages, as we could say, because they were not recognized. These wives whom they wed were not recognized by the British Army, and so they were left behind. So while the foot soldiers were marching on one fine day towards their warfield in Crimea, towards the British ports, that is, they were being looked by, or they were being remembered by the women whom they had married and who were not registered to gain any provisions or extra benefits on behalf of the British government, as well as they had 2 children in their hands, and they were expecting or pregnant with a 3rd one, and so they were forced to, and they had no income at all, so they were forced to abandon their children, and they were forced to put the children in at the mercy of the chapels or the churches, who would subsequently put them into orphanages and make them work, and also they were forced to look for domestic help, or enroll themselves as domestic help and stay very low and be treated like almost animals, and they had no provisions for medical supplies, etc. They were absolutely at the mercy of their of their employers. So it was a very tough time for them, and this was the first time that we see that in British history that there were women who had started looking for a job, even though it was domestic help, which did give rise to another movement, which was during the war, not during this particular war, but further on it did result in other movements as well, where there was a lot of women activism, but this was where it all started. Then there were the foot soldiers' wives who were registered as wives and who were allowed to get married. In the eyes of the British regiment or the British army, they had to lead very uncomfortable lives because they had to be amongst the barracks, and they also had they had no privacy, as well as in case if there were other wives who were there, they had to somehow manage with each other and do the laundry, do the clothes, do the general work, and do the cooking, etc. There was a lot of hardship which was involved, and they were not paid extra for it. Also, there was there's a mention of the contribution of Queen Victoria, who did her own part in trying her very best to maintain her aristocracy, not maintain her aristocracy, but maintaining her sovereign, as well as doing as much as possible for the soldiers whom she was losing in the battlefield, and the care which she took in trying to give out her condolences to the families who were losing their sons or their husbands, and she did a lot of work, and it was actually her army. That is how close she was. So that was something which I really loved about her. There was also a mention about the army officers' wives who were supposed to be in the battlefield. Some of them did dare to go in the battlefield, but some of them did watch the battle from a very far off place. So that is something which it did show how much they would go with their husbands, and those who did go, what they had to face. And there's a lot of which has been written by the British officers' wives as well. Then there's a lot which has been written about the women whom Florence Nightingale had recruited in her squad of nurses, as they say, to take with her in the Crimean War. And about Florence Nightingale herself, we also have mentioned about Mary Seacole, as well as we have mentioned about the nurses, as well as the Sisters of Charity, who were trying to do their best to keep up with the health of the depleting health of the soldiers, and what techniques Florence Nightingale applied to make sure that she changes the whole scenario of the medical, as far as the medical health is concerned, of the soldiers who were wounded, and how she tactfully managed everything, and how Mary Seacole, who was a businesswoman, did her share of tactics to help not only the depressed soldiers at the battlefield, but she herself went to the battlefield and she acted as a frontline nurse, wherein she went and bandaged whatever and whoever she found in front. So she was all in the muck and the gore, and early in the morning when the battle was almost it was on a low tide, and that was when she went to the soldiers or the wounded soldiers, dragged them out of the mud, tried to heal them, and tried to do as much as possible. So there's a lot which has been written, and of other women, especially from the French regiment as well. So this is a very good book, and of course I've not spoken everything, but I would recommend this book to anybody who's interested in the Crimean War, which definitely affected the women of the Victorian age. So that would be the third challenge. Now the fourth challenge was to read a fiction about nursing or related to nursing. So for this I had chosen to read The Nightingale Girls by Donna Douglas, and I found this amazing because this is a story about it's actually a story about this finishing school, as they call it, the prestigious Nightingale Nursing's finishing school, and it helps women to find an independent profession. And this is what we see through the main character in this book, who is Dora, and she's from a very lower middle class family, and she is trying to get away from her abusive stepfather, as well as she's trying to become independent and become a bread earner for herself, so that she doesn't become a burden and she doesn't end up like the other girls in her society. And it has another character called Helen Tremaine, who is the daughter who has to live up to the expectations, or the very high expectations of her mother, who is the trustee of this school, as well as there is another woman who's by the name of Millie, who is supposed to be the daughter of an earl, and she needs to prove herself so that she doesn't have to get married in lace and pretty clothes, and she doesn't become a pretty doll, but a person who is absolutely intelligent and can prove herself in work. This novel is set around 1930s, and I loved the way that this the story went. So there are 7 concluding parts in this particular series, and I have fortunately managed to get all the 7 parts, which I'll be reading bit by bit during the months of January, February and March. So once I complete them, I will definitely be doing book reviews on them and sharing a bit of the story. But I really loved this storyline of this, and I really enjoyed it. So I would recommend anybody who is interested in knowing more about how nursing changed, or let's say Florence Nightingale's school, the Nightingale Girls Foundation, which had been the first professional institution for educating women in the field of professional nursing, how that helped in changing the lives of women. And this definitely shows, this story definitely reflects a lot upon it. So it was a perfect read for this particular challenge. Now the last challenge, or the Florence Nightingale August challenge, was to read, or the Nightingale August challenge was to read a book which gave an account of a real life experience of a nurse, or in the nursing field. So for this I had chosen to read Confessions of a School Nurse. Now we usually ignore the nurses which are present in schools, which who help in medical aid or immediate medical aid, and this book is about the true confessions, or the real life stories of a nurse who, from the hectic emergency situations of the hospitals, chose to take a break and go to a boarding school and apply for being a school nurse, and how he encountered the psychology of young students who were at the boarding school. And this is absolutely hilarious, and I actually loved it because of the very fact that it gives a detailed account of the psychology of students and how they tried their very best to skip classes, to skip lessons, to skip tests which they do not like, or they have problems with certain teachers, so they try to run away. And there are some who are quite frightened with needles and syringes, so how they keep quiet. So it's really humorous, and there were places where I had to burst out laughing. It's a very enjoyable read, and I would recommend this to anybody who is looking for a fun approach to or a fun encounter of real life nursing with school children. So this was an amazing read. So these were the 5 prompts which I completed, or the 5 books which I completed for the 5 prompts. Actually there were 6 books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes, 6 books for these 5 prompts. Now for the Nightingale Seacole September, I had chosen to read for the prompt which had to deal with a real life account of a frontline nurse or a paramedic, and for this I had chosen to read Fighting for Your Life, a paramedic's story by Eliza Walter. And I was amazed at the bravery as well as the on-the-spot and pragmatic approach that paramedics have to apply in their jobs, and also how difficult it is. It was a real eye-opener for me, and I really learned a lot from this, especially with regards to tragic accidents, to relationships, and to how they have to make the 1-minute decision into dealing with the situation at hand, because they're the first face that a wounded patient would always see. So there are instances when they have very I would say difficult lives, because it's, for example, there is a part, or there's a story in this wherein there was a man who was depressed with life, and he had tried to take his life or tried to commit suicide at least twice or thrice, but he had failed. And on New Year's Eve, when they were all enjoying themselves, he had decided to jump off the train, not jump off, but jump in front of the train. And the paramedics had took at least 1 hour at the strike of midnight to hunt for the missing limbs of his body, and then finally they could trace that out and then reported to the police. So the amount of exhaustion and the amount of gore which they had to see on a New Year's Day, or after enjoying a New Year's Eve, was something which was really quite astounding, as well as the way in which they have to absorb the heat which is coming in from, or the heat which is thrown out at them in the form of abusive language by drug addicts, because there was one account in which she had to, or the paramedic team had to report to a scene in which there was a drug addict who had taken extra dosage of drugs, and he had to be revived, which was done in proper time, and they had to face abuses because he was revived, because he was trying to commit suicide. So this is something which was quite, I would say, I can't really find the right word for it, but it's a very difficult job, and I am filled with appreciation for the amount of pragmatism that and wholeheartedness with which paramedics do complete their jobs. So we do see them every day in the ambulances, but we really don't know, and we can't appreciate how tough their life is. The same thing goes for the nursing department. We don't know how tough their life is, but it is actually the nurses who look after us. The doctors, yes, they are going to give us the entire procedure and they are going to do the technical part of it, but the person who looks after us is, when we are ill and in the hospital, are the nurses, as well as the first face which we meet when we are in the midst of an accident, or we have an emergency, a medical emergency that is a paramedic. And we should learn how to appreciate their work and how difficult their job is. Maybe we can, by reading this, we can actually, or by becoming aware of this, we can learn how to appreciate the toughness of the situation and the blunders which we commit by not understanding things from their point of view. So that's something which I really learned in this. So these were the books which I had completed for the Nightingale August challenge and the Nightingale Seacole September challenge. There were a few other books which I had collected and which I thought I may be able to complete, but because I had a lot of things which were going on during the month of September, so I decided that I'll just keep things to a minimum. I hope that with this I'll be able to improve upon the Nightingale August and Nightingale Seacole September next year, and with that I'll be wrapping up this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I had a great learning experience with this challenge. So thank you so much for joining me in this video. Have a good reading week ahead, and namaste.